Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Ahmed Yerima's Otello. So this is a Nigerian adaptation of Shakespeare's Othello, specifically located in Yerima's own Igbo culture, which is important because the Igbo have a particular institution, the Osa caste system, and that's really important for this play. So there's two main things that I think are really, really fascinating with Yerima's adaptation of Othello, and I'll talk about them both in this video. And the first one is the way in which it's relocated into Igbo culture. And the second is the way in which this version of the tragic story diverges from Shakespeare's version by incorporating some other traditions of tragic drama. So the reason that it's significant and interesting that that this is relocated to Nigeria is because Otello is not a story about a racial outsider, which is a really dramatic change from Shakespeare's Othello, where race is, in many readings at least, the central element of the play. Here, Otello is of the same race, the same ethnic group as the dominant society here. But he is an Osa, which is it's a low caste group of sort of outcasts is maybe a good translation, but they are sort of consecrate to the deities. So it's not just like, so like I think in India, in the Indian caste system, the untouchables were the lowest rung, and they just sort of did menial labor and things like this. They didn't really have rights. They weren't necessarily regarded as full humans, maybe. I'm not 100% clear on the status of their humanity, but they were just sort of low-class people who did jobs like street sweeping and things like this. In the Osa caste system, one important difference seems to be that the Osas they belong to the gods. So there's a sacred or holy aspect to this caste that we don't get in a lot of other caste systems, a lot of other social hierarchies. Because normally, like in the Indian caste system, the Brahmins, the people at the top, were the most holy. They had the closest connections to the deities. Here, the Osas seem to have a very strong connection to the deities. Although my sense is that this was a caste that was used for sacrifices. I don't know if that's accurate or not, because I don't know a massive amount about this particular social system beyond the little bit that I've read and what we see in this play. But the crucial thing to take from this is that Otello is not considered a suitable person to marry Chinyere, who's the princess, who is this play's version of Desdemona. And in fact, people are really not that chuffed that the king has even taken Otello to battle, because when the play starts, the king and his army and his retinue and everyone are out conquering some other villages, and Otello has gone with them. And even some of the slaves in the king's household are like, nah, man, it would be better to take a slave to war with you than to take an Osa. So, I mean, that gives you a sense of just how far down the social totem pole this group is, because the slaves are looking down on them. But Otello saves the king's life, and so the king, when they return, promises Otello whatever it is that he wants. He will give him anything that the man asks for. Otello, who's in love with Chinyere, and Chinyere is in love with him, although they recognize that they can never normally actually be together because of their social class differences. Otello asks for her hand in marriage, which puts the king in an awkward spot because on the one hand he promised anything that Otello wanted would be granted. On the other hand, it's a massive, massive problem for this society because this is someone who according to the traditions and the social rules could not even marry a regular sort of standard freeborn person, who it would be even questionable if an Osa could marry a slave. So this is a completely unacceptable match in this hierarchy. The king's advisors generally say, yeah, fuck it, don't let him get married to your daughter. It's not acceptable. Our ancestors and the gods are looking down on this, and they are ashamed, they are weeping, they are gnashing their teeth, etc., etc. And so that's a really interesting change in that way, because the shift now is from race-based differences to class-based differences. And actually in his author's notes, Yerima even says, the Osu caste system is the most painful practice among the Igbo people, for it separates man from man and the soul from existence. I have from the outside viewed how this practice has torn wonderful friends of mine apart. To date, even after this play, the common sense of it eludes me. So, I mean, this is clearly a thing that Yerima is taking aim at and saying, this is wrong. This system creates tragedy, creates destruction and violence and destitution. So we have that element. But the other thing that I think is really, really cool about Yerima's particular approach is that he blends Othello. He blends the Shakespearean approach to tragedy in Othello with other tragic traditions. Things that we see in West African tragedy and things that we see in Greek tragedy. Namely, the central role of the gods, the central role of fate, and the punishment of hubris. And so those are all in here, and I think it's really interesting the way that these are blended in. So to start with the idea of, the gods are all the way through this. Sometimes they are supportive, sometimes they are not supportive. They're often appealed to, etc., for different things. But early in the play, actually in the first scene, Chinyere reveals to her grandmother that, as she says here, Osimiri, the river goddess, had chosen me for her priestess, and that if I failed to accept her choice, I would either go mad or die. So, Osimiri, the river goddess, here is this sort of voice of fate, this compelling force. And we see this substantially in Greek tragedy. In something like Oedipus the King, we have a prophecy that foretells what's going to happen, and then it does in fact occur. Chinyere, at the end of the play, does actually die. And again, she's the Desdemona figure of this play, so she is killed by Otello. I'll talk to you about that a little bit, and then I want to come back to this other thing, because the other element that we get that we see in both a lot of West African drama and also in Greek drama is the punishment of hubris. So we've got the dramatic conclusion, the tragic conclusion of Otaelo comes through the machinations of Agbo, who is the Iago figure. So what happens is that Otaelo gives Chinyere a jigida, which is a sort of waistband, a beaded sort of waistband, multiple strands of beads in distinct colors and patterns and things like this, which signify particular things like health, fidelity, purity, honor, whatever it is. And so this is significant. It's a significant accoutrement. And Otaelo, it's from his mother. He's meant to give it to the woman he loves. This is Othello's handkerchief, right? So Obiagele, who's Agbo's wife, one of Agbo's wives, tells him that she's seen Chinyere's new jigida, and she really wants one of her own just like it. So Agbo convinces her to steal it, so that, giving her the excuse that way he can have the craftsperson make sure it's the same, make sure that the beads are aligned and the strings are the right color and all this stuff. And so, but what Agbo actually intends to do is to entrap Otaelo. So he says, "Now like a spider I must cast my web. The jigida is my tool, and Otelo's large heart will be my playground. Now I know the gods are with me. I cannot fail." So we've got that bit. And then Agbo plants the jigida on Otelo's sort of former friend, former protege, a guy who he had been, who had been his sort of second in command in his military service, until this guy ran away when he thought that Otaelo had been killed. So this guy is trying to get back into Otelo's good graces, and so Agbo gives him the jigida and says, "Hey, go return this to Chinyere. She'll really appreciate it, and then she'll put in a good word for you." Meanwhile, Agbo tells Otaelo just straight out, more direct than Iago does in Othello, tells him that he has seen Chinyere and this guy having sex basically at the direction of Chinyere's mother, the queen, who does not approve of the match with Otaelo because he's an Osu. So this sets the wheels in motion, and when Otaelo is wrestling, and so this guy shows up, Otaelo wrestles him, the jigida falls out of his bag, and Otaelo kills him, taking this as proof that he actually has seduced Chinyere. Then he goes and kills Chinyere, and then he kills Agbo and kills himself. So, not a happy ending. It's a bad business all around. But the other thing that I think is really interesting that Yerima has incorporated into this version is the idea that hubris is punished. Because at one point, about the middle of the play, a guy named Ebuka comes to Otaelo. And Ebuka is an old man who had raised Otaelo among the Osu outcasts. And he basically says, "You should come back home with me. This is not going to end well with you. Come back to your people. We love you. We want you to be alive and with us." And Otaelo says, "Here I am, me, a mere mortal, though not fit to be called a man, greater than the god Allah." And Allah, A-L-A, is an earth deity who seems to be the sort of special protector of Osu people. Ebuka says, "Caution, son, you anger the god Allah, and he retaliates." Otaelo says, "Let him. Retaliates? Ha! Which god? I'm greater than the god Allah. I am greater than all men. Through my bravery, I turn my black blood red. Yes, old man, I'm equal to the god Allah." So Otaelo is not exactly acting with humility. He's not exactly respecting the power of the gods. And so we see this, again, like, this is a component that we do see in West African drama, but it's also something we see very distinctly in Greek tragedy. You think of a figure like Ajax in the Sophocles play. Like, this is a character who's like, I am greater than the gods, I don't need Athena's help in battle, and she destroys him. So again, we've got these really interesting blendings of different tragic traditions that play out in Ahmed Yerima's Otaelo.